Who would have guessed that the Chinese communists would improve their big country as much as they have in the last 30 years? The first 20 years, they had the Cultural Revolution. It was crazy. And now they have one of the greatest success records in the history of mankind. I don't know about you, but I did not predict it. They copied Singapore. The communist leader said, I don't care if the cat is black or white, I care whether it catches mice. And they copied a very wonderful, famous Chinese man in Singapore. And lo and behold, they found the right Chinese leadership outside of China, which amuses me. But look at the way it worked. In the whole history of the world, no nation that big has ever advanced that fast. And they did it by having a bunch of poor people save half their income. They did not use the wealth of the rich world to get ahead. They used the savings of poor people. I am a huge admirer of what the Chinese have accomplished. And if you ask me who is the one man who did the most for China, it was Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. They copied him. They've been succeeding for a long time. Sure, they have ups and downs, and they make mistakes as well as good decisions. But if you average them out, the Chinese are getting ahead. They're not moving backward. It's natural for people to think their own civilization and their own nation is better than everybody else. But everybody can't be better than everybody else. You're right. China's economic record among the big nations is the best that ever existed in the history of the world. And that's very interesting. A lot of people assume that since England led the Industrial Revolution and had free speech early, that free speech is required to have a booming economy as prescribed by Adam Smith. But the Chinese have proved you don't need free speech to have a wonderful economy. They just copied Adam Smith and left out the free speech, and it worked fine for them. As a matter of fact, it's not clear to me that China would have done better if they'd copied every aspect of English civilization. I think they would have come out worse because their position was so dire and the poverty was so extreme. They needed very extreme methods, totalitarian methods, if you will, to get out of the fix they were in. So I think what China has done was probably right for China, and that we shouldn't be so pompous as to be telling the Chinese they ought to behave like us because we like ourselves and our system. It's entirely possible that our system is right for us and their system is right for them. China is a big modern nation. It's got this huge population and this huge modernity that's come in the last 30 years. And we invested some money in China because we could get more value in terms of the strength of the enterprise and the price of the security than we could get in the United States. Well, we did it for a very simple reason. We got more strength per dollar invested. In China, the companies we invest in are stronger relative to their competition and priced lower. That's why we're in China. We like our government because we're used to it and it has advantages of personal freedom. China could never have handled its life with a government like ours. They wouldn't be in the position they're in. They had to prevent 500 million or 600 million people from being born in China. They just measured the women's menstrual periods when they came to work and aborted those who weren't allowed to have children. You can't do that in the United States, and it really needed doing in China. And so they did what they had to do using their methods. And I don't think we should be criticizing China, which has terrible problems because they're not just like the United States. They do some things better than we do. I'm also invested very significantly in China through the management of Li Lu, whom the Munger family backed heavily when he formed a little private equity firm to invest in China. And he has had a very successful record, and that's made me follow very closely the leading companies in China. And of course, I've had very successful experience there. And I think it's likely to continue. The Chinese story is the damnedest thing that it's the damnedest thing that ever happened to a big country in terms of economics. No other big country ever got ahead this fast for that long. We Americans would like to think that our free expression and allowing all kinds of opinion and all kinds of criticism of the government is totally essential part of the economy. And what the Chinese have proved is you can have a screamingly successful economy with a fairly controlling government. All the government has to do is create a lot of Smithian capitalism. And if you do that, having a sort of a controlling one-party government doesn't matter. That's not a fashionable thing to say, but I think it's true. I think that what they did was admirable. So basically, I don't have this hostility toward China. I really admire what the Chinese people have achieved. And I think, considering that they started as communists, their leaders are pretty good. And it's amazing. Imagine a communist country creating this enormous period of growth and prosperity and lifting 800 million people out of poverty. I like what's happening in China. There's no question about the fact that the government of China has worried the investors from the United States who invest in China more in recent months and years than he did in earlier periods. So there's been some tension, and it's affected the prices of some of the Chinese stocks, particularly internet stocks. Just in the last day or two, the Chinese leader has sort of reversed course on that. Said he went too far and he's going to pull way back, and so on and so on. So we're having some hopeful signs. But yes, there are more difficulties of dealing with the regime in China than there are in the United States. And it's different. It's a long way away, and they have their own culture and their own loyalties and so on and so on. The reason that I invested in China is I could get so much better companies at so much lower prices, and I was willing to take a little political risk to get into the better companies at the lower prices. Other people might reach the opposite conclusion, and everybody is more worried about China now than they were 2 or 3 years ago. So that's just the way it is.
I have nothing to add.